Today we are working on Chapter 12, Programming Challenge 11. And this programming challenge is to create a game called Tic-Tac-Toe. So let's create the game. The class would extend frame here, and it will implement action listener. We have to create 3 panels. One panel to hold the other 2 panels, and one panel to hold the labels, and the other to hold the buttons. They said we have to create a 2-dimensional int array according to the description called random nums, and it will have 3 rows and 3 columns. It will also have another 2-dimensional array, but this time it will be labels. It will have 3 rows and 3 columns. But we have to create 3 buttons here. The first one would be exit button. The second one would be reset button, and the last one would be new game. For that, you have to also create a boolean field called draw. It will be false. This will keep track of whether the 2 players drawn each other or not. Then we have to create the constructor for the class. To give a title for the window, Tic-Tac-Toe simulator. Then we will say set components. We will create this method later, but now we'll say set size. The size would be new dimension 300 wide by 400 high. We have to add the main panel to the window here, and we will set it to the north side of the window here. And here we will say set default close operations, frame exit on close. And lastly, always set the visibility last in the constructor. Here we will create a method called set components, and here we will create the main method that will run our program. And inside the set components method, first thing we will set is the main panel, the layout to be border layout. Then we also will set the border, new empty border. It will have 20 pixels all around the corners. We also need to set the layout of the other 2 panels. And their layout would be a grid layout for the board panel. It will have 3 rows and 3 columns for the labels. And the control panel will have a grid layout as well. It will have 1 row and 3 columns. And lastly, here in the method, we will say main panel, add board panel. It will set to the north. We'll say just center, the center of the window. Say main panel and a control panel to the south. We have to instantiate the 2-dimensional labels. We have to instantiate it, and we have to add it to the port. So we'll say for inside the inner for loop, we have to instantiate each label, and we will say labels of I of j equals new label. And inside the label constructor, we want to set it to the text to empty. Also, we want to center the text. We'll say swing constants center. What we have to do is just also set the font. we'll say font. It will be Helvetica, and it will be a font Helvetica, comma, font bold, and it will have a size of 30. But we have to also set the size of each label, and I forgot to create an X and Y here because we want to change the location of each label as the for loop runs. So we'll say X and Y, and each label will have not set size, I mean set bounds, I meant. As each for loop runs, the X and Y changes so that the label's location changes as well, because we want to space them, apart. We will add each label to the board panel to add labels of I, of J. So we have to increment the X inside the inner loop. We will add 100 pixels, and after the inner loop we have to set it to 20, and then we have to also increment the Y axis so that each row will have 3 labels and each column will have a 3 row. You have to add the 3 buttons to the control panel. But before we add the buttons to the control panel, we have to add action listener to each button. After that, you have to add the buttons to the control panel. So we added the labels to the panel, and we added the buttons to the control panel, and we added both the control panel and the port panel to the main panel. So let's see if everything is working correctly as we expect. Okay. Port panel. I see the problem. Now I see it. So inside the constructor, instead of saying border layout north, what you're gonna say is center. So now it should look like okay now. As you can see, everything is working as we expect. It's displayed as we expect. So let's add a border to each label. So inside the for loop here, you say label of I, of J, set border. You say border factory dot create lowered a bevel border. You run again and see if there is a border around each label. As you can see, there is a border. You can also add a border the control panel. Control panel set border border factory create raised border. After we created the labels and the buttons, what we have to work on is the action perform method, just so that whenever person clicks the new game button happens, a new game is generated. But before that, we have to work on the reset button. So we say e.get source is equal to reset. If the person clicks the reset button, we want to set everything to its original way. So we don't have to instantiate the labels again because they already have been. So we'll say labels of I of J set text to empty. So we'll say exit button. we don't want to reset anything here. We're going to say system exit 0. So when we run, these two buttons should work. So as you can see, there is contents for each label. Once we click reset, it resets to empty. And whenever we click exit, it should terminate the entire program. Say if get source is equal to new game. So you have to call get winner method. Before get winner, we have to update labels. You have to create those methods. You have to populate two-dimensional int array random numbers. We have to populate that first before we can update the labels. So you're gonna say private, and this will return two-dimensional array get random numbers. What we're gonna say is random, and we have to create two for loops here. We're gonna generate the random number here. Random next int, and the random number range would be 0 or 1, 0 to 1 I mean. So we have to pass 2 here. Then random nums of I of j equal rand. And lastly, for this method, we're going to return the random number that we populated with the random numbers. Inside this method, update the labels. You're going to say int random numbers. We have to get the method that we worked on here, and then we have to populate the labels. But before we can set the text for the label, we have to make sure that they are either X or O. To do that, we're going to say char letter. We're going to say if it is 1, you're going to return X. Otherwise, you're going to return O for the letter. Then all we have to do is just populate the labels. Set a text string value letter. So that's it for labels. Let's run the program and see if the letters show up in our. So as you can see, it's just an empty J labels. Whenever we click the new game, as you can see, it shows the letters, whether X or O. Let me increase the size of the frame. So we're gonna say it will be 500 by 400. Okay, since we updated the label, now we have to work on who won, which player won the game, right? That's the whole point of this programming challenge. We're gonna create another method here. We're gonna say Boolean X player wins. The instances where X player wins. And in order for the X player to win, either he has to get a 3 X in a row horizontally, or vertically, or diagonally, or it has to be like this vertical. If there's all X's here, the X player wins. If there is all X's here, X player wins. If there are all X's here, X player wins, as well as in this diagonal, or this diagonal, or horizontally. So we have to check 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 0, 2, 1, and 2, 2. Basically, we have to check all the possible slots where X may fall. So I will write all these logic, and I will come back and explain everything to you. I completed this method where we have to decide if the X player wins, and we have to check all the labels whether it is equal X. First, we check whether the first diagonal equals X. You know, the three labels that is located at the diagonal 1 is equal to X. And the three labels are 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2, 2. That's the first diagonal. We have to make sure all three labels contain the letter X. You know, so this diagonal 1 will return true or false. And we have to also check the second diagonal, which starts from 0, 2 to 2, 0, and it end up with 2, 0. That is also has to return true in order the X player to win. So we checked the two diagonals. Also, we have to check the columns, all three columns, whether they are equal to X. You have to check that. As well as we have to also check the horizontal, all three horizontal labels. We have to check whether they are equal to X. Basically, we have to check all 9 labels for player X. And if any 3 of them equal to X, the X player wins. Basically, that's what this return statement tells. Either diagonal 1 will be true, or diagonal 2 will be true, or column 1, 2, or 3 will be true, or horizontal 1, 2, or 3 will be true. If any of these different cases return true, the X player wins. And it is similar for the Y player as well. We check the diagonal 1 and 2, and we check whether it any label equal to O, and if either of these columns, horizontals, or diagonals equal to O, any 3 of them equal to O, that means Y player wins. So this two methods job is to check which player win, X or Y, X or Y player. Then we have to create another a method called get winner, and this method's job is to check who won the game, or whether they draw. So the first if statement checks if both Y player and X player won, and if so, we set the Boolean field draw to true, and we say if it is a draw, then we inform the user that it's a draw. Otherwise, we set it to false. We don't actually need this, but I just added. But this if statement checks whether X player wins and it is not a draw. Because sometimes what happens is that X player wins and Y player wins, right? Which in that case, it will be a draw, right? So we will get the X player dialogue, and we will get the Y player dialogue, and we will get the draw dialogue. So we will get 3 dialogues. So we don't want that. We only want to see the X player dialogue when X player wins, and we want to see Y player dialogue when Y player wins, and we only want to see the draw dialogue whenever there is a draw. We don't want to see 3 different dialogues if there is a draw. So that's what this method takes care of. This is the entire program. To summarize, we created a class called Tic-Tac-Toe Simulator. It extends a J-frame and implements action listener. It has 3 J panels, main panel, port panel, and control panel. It will also has 3 buttons, exit button, new game button, and reset button. A 2-dimensional int array that is 3 rows and 3 columns. We also need, according to the description, we also need 2-dimensional J labels. I call it labels, and it will have 3 rows and 3 columns. I also created a Boolean field called draw. Here, the constructor will only show the title of the window, and we'll call the set components method. Here is setting the window. We add the main panel to the window, and we set it to the center. We set the size to 500 by 400. Actually, we need to set it for 500 here. Then we set the default close operations to exit on close, and we set this the visibility to true. Here we create a method called set components, and we set the layout for all 3 panels. And here we create X and Y to change the location of the different labels that's in the 2D J label. Then here we create 2 for loops, and we instantiate each label in the 2D label, and we center the text inside it. Here we set the font of each label to be Helvetica and bold and 30 points size. Then we set the size of the labels to be 100 by 100, and we also set the location each label will sit in X and Y axis here. The X and Y changes as the loop runs or iterates. Then here we add each label to the port panel, and we increment the X axis by 100 each time the inner loop runs. After the inner loop ends, we set the X to 20, and we increment Y axis by 100 to draw the second row and third row of the 2D array. Then here we add action listeners to all 3 buttons. Then we add all 3 buttons to the control panel. Then we add the 2 panels to the main panel, board panel, and control panel, and we set them to center and south side of the panel. Here we create a method that will return a 2D int array called getRandomNumbers, and we create a random instance, and we create 9 different random numbers, and we store it in this 2D int array. And here we return the 2D int array called gameboard. Here we create another method called update labels. We will update the labels, the random numbers that we generated, and we store it in this 2D int array. We go through the int array, the 2D int array. Here is the number, and we get each number, and we convert the number to either X or O. If the number is 1, we convert it to X. If the number is 0, we convert it to O. And we store it here, this character letter. And then we set each label to this letter. And here in this method, action performed, which we got when we implemented action listener, we check if the person clicks the reset button. If so, then we go through all the labels and we set it to an empty string. And if the person clicks the new game, we update the labels and we get the winner. We call these two methods. And if the person clicks the exit button, we just terminate the entire program. And here is the methods that I described earlier. Get winner will get the winner for us, or it will get the draw if there is a draw. And here are the Y player, and here is X player methods that will get us whether a Y player wins or X player wins. And lastly, in this method is just a main method that will run the entire program for us. So let's run the program and see how it works. So you can see there are a total of 9 J labels. And in order a player to win, either the player has to get all X's vertically, horizontally, or diagonally, or all O's vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. So whenever we click a new game, they say X wins, and the reason they say X wins is because X got 3 X's in a row at the top of the window. When we click again, it says Y player wins, and the reason is that the O's got 3 O's diagonally. Whenever we run it again, X wins is because X goes this way. Whenever we click reset, as you saw, it resets all the labels to nothing. Here it says draw, and the reason is that there is 3 O's here and 3 O's here. So I think the program works just as we expected. We have seen that the X player win, the Y player win. We have seen a draw. We resetted the entire program. We terminated the entire game. So that's what they wanted, I assume, according to the description for this programming challenge. If you need the code, or if you have any questions or commentary, please let me know. I will provide it to you, and I will help you. If you like this kind of videos, please subscribe and like this video if you find it useful. Thank you, and I will see you next time.